Okay, hello everyone. I hope you are all doing well today. So good afternoon in Indonesia and good morning here. So welcome to our 13th panel here with the topic of eco-spiritual perspective for modern society. And I'm Najiyah Martiam. I will be the moderator for this panel. We have three interesting presenters today. So with very interesting papers. And yeah, I think before we start, I want to let you know that every presenter will have 15 minutes to present their papers. And then after that, we will have discussions about each papers. So, okay. I also want to inform you that this conference also live streamed through YouTube, so you can also access through YouTube, and then you can write down your comment or question in YouTube comment too, and also here in chat box of this Zoom, and yeah, okay. Without further ado, I will invite the three presenters. So I will call the Nuruddin Al Akbar for the first presenter, and then we will continue to Lope, Balantucas, Robin, and Hadje Cresencio. Hadje, forgive me if I pronounce your name not correctly. And then the third will be Nareswati, Kintoko, Budiningsi, and Febrian, Indar, Surya Kusuma, and Satria, Indar, Dwi Kusuma. So we can start from the first presenter. Hello, Nuruddin Al Akbar, are you here? No.
Still not here, Mbak Jim. Maybe we can move to the next presenter.
Okay, then we can move to the next presenter. I see here Hadje, the second presenter is here. Hello. The second presenter, are you ready?
Hello, Doc Najiyah. I will take over the first.
Yes.
So the first presenter is not yet here.
Yes, because the first presenter is not yet here, so we can.
Okay.
Go to
that's good, Doc.
Presenter.
Okay. Sorry. Let me prepare my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're Lope Balantucas.
So I will share my screen now.
Hi, Hadje, Sadje, is it correct?
Yes.
The way I mentioned your name?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Okay, you have 15 minutes to present your paper.
Okay. Thank you very much for these wonderful opportunities to share to share our research. Dr. Lope is not here, but he's full support of our paper. So the title of our paper is Earth-Based Spirituality of Indigenous People and the Well-Being of Creation, a decolonial intervention of the human and nature divide. Let me offer you this outline. So the first part will be focused on the Igorot socio-political and cultural religious beliefs and practices. The second part is how Igorots' spirituality shaped their attitude toward nature. And the third part is We would like to ask why decolonial options, and then we will provide a very short conclusion. Let me start now. Today, the indigenous knowledge, skills, and practices and spiritualities, or IKSPS, has been proven by various researchers to have a significant contribution solving many of the contemporary global challenges, particularly the global environmental crisis. In the Philippines, in the Philippine context, the indigenous knowledge or skills, practices, spiritualities become one of the non-Western models that promote sustainable development goal. For example, the Igorot are the indigenous Filipinos born on the Gran Cordillera Central, or the Great Chain of the Mountains of Northern Luzon. Igorot is a generic name for indigenous people in the Cordillera. Because of the topographical locations of the homeland, the Igorots are called mountain people.
Mhm.
The Igorots in the Cordillera region are composed of six ethno-linguistics groups: the Bondok, Ibaloy, Ifugao, Esneg or Apayao, Kalinga, and Kankanayen. The Igorots are scattered all over the wide mountain ranges of Cordillera region. But historically, they are all one thing in common. Whatever they are called, their ancestor resisted assimilation into the Spanish Empire for the 3 centuries. The historical facts should make every freedom-loving Filipino proud, because unlike some of the highly educated Filipinos who collaborated with the Spanish colonizers, the Igorots never surrendered their ancestral domains to the foreign intruders. With that, the questions then arises what we can learn from the Igorots' indigenous beliefs and practices. In this paper, we organize as follows. First, the paper gives a brief overview of the Igorot socio-political, cultural, religious beliefs and practices. The second part, papers explores how Igorot spirituality shape their attitudes toward nature. And the third part will deal with the questions why the colonial option is important in promoting indigenous knowledge, skills, practices, and spiritualities, especially the Igorots' earth-based spirituality, to challenge the Western notions of human nature divide. And the last part will be the very short conclusion. Together with all other related institutions of one of the mainline Protestant churches in the Philippines, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, the Siliman University Divinity School joins the entire country in the observance of the Indigenous Peoples Month. The yearly celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Month is under the Presidential Proclamations number 1906 signed in 2009, which is per the Constitution or the Philippine constitutional mandate on the recognition and protection of the rights of the indigenous cultural communities, indigenous peoples. As indicated in the foregoing, we talk about indigenous peoples. What immediately comes to mind is their vulnerability to abuse and exploitation as manifested in the continuing intrusions by the government, private entities in their ancestral domains. But more than their vulnerability, helplessness, and their need for protections from concerned individuals and institutions, the IPs or indigenous peoples have so much to offer to everyone, especially in the face of unabated ecological distractions that has threatened and in the entire community in the whole creation in this age of the climate change. As we all know, climate change is caused by the irresponsible actions of human beings against creation. Of course, not to mention the social structural ideology that dominate now in our times, like the neoliberal policies toward the environmental crisis. Given the common dictum on the inseparability between theology and ethics, Christians have indeed so much to learn from the earth-based spirituality of the indigenous people in general and indigenous Filipinos in particular. Such earth-based spirituality is subsequently translated into their profound love and care for nature. As the result, the natural world is all indigenous people communities is generally in good condition compared to that of the lowland Filipinos. Among many indigenous Filipinos communities in the Philippines archipelago, this presentation limits only to the Igorot of the northern Luzon. Now let's first discuss the Igorots in the Cordillera region. The Igorot are the indigenous peoples. Perhaps we can jump on the other because I have only 15 minutes. Now, beliefs of Igorots. Aside from economic consideration, the Igorots defend their mountains and forests even unto death for religious and spiritual reasons. The attitude of the Igorots toward the land, the natural resources, is a profound expression of their spirituality. For Igorot women and men, nature is viewed in a spiritual terms. These profound religious convictions has gained the Igorots a reputation of being spiritual people. Victoria Tolly Corpus, a Christian Igorot, narrates, the Igorot marks every event he considers of any significance from birth to death with formal rites, prayers, and songs, and recognizably religious content. Or more accurately, every event from before birth until death, from the welfare of the Igorot in the womb and the grave, is also ceremonially considered. This shows that sociocultural life of the Igorots is heavily shaped by their religious belief and the religion in the integral of their lives. Impressed by the kind of spirituality that is practiced by the Igorots, as a columnist of National Broadsheet, Bambi L. Harper writes, those who called Igorots savage did so out of ignorance, for these dwellers of the mountains had their own religious beliefs and cultural tradition that set them apart as the people. The spiritual link between the Igorots and the natural world is very well established, so that it's not easy to let go of the land. As such, Igorot have always been actively involved in the struggle to defend their ancestral domains, because for them, land is life. The Igorot seal of the protections of natural world is done out of reverence and respect for the gods and the spirits that are associated with nature. Studies in the Ifugao ethno-linguistic group shows that it has produced the most, I quote, extensive and pervasive religion that has yet been reported outside of India, at least in ethnographic literatures. The Ifugaos have the most number of deities, since they distinguish and have names for as many as 1,240 deities. Because of the faith convictions of the Igorots that the gods and the spirits dwell in the different land formations, bodies of water, and forests, they consider the natural world as sacred. The unity between faith and praxis of the Igorot is sustained by their profound worship life. They worship the spirit of nature as well as those of their ancestors. Private and community prayers are addressed to the spirit of the ancestors and spirit of nature, because the Igorots believe that the spirits have power over them in their daily undertaking, particularly in agriculture. They revere, respect, and fear the spirits of nature and those of their ancestors. Rituals are performed to thank and appease them. Let me jump again. Now, Igorot spirituality shapes their attitude toward nature. The Igorot's commitment to defend even unto death their forest lands and mountains against any intruder is firmly grounded in their sense of spirituality. They do not allow any outsiders to inflict damage of the forest lands and mountains to fear that they would be punished should they fail to protect the dwelling places of their ancestors and nature spirits, since these are their inheritance. Since the Igorots are granted the rights by the gods and the spirits to use the forest lands and the mountains for their living, they in return have strong sense of responsibility to protect them from any form of distractions. Because of the Igorots respected the spirits and also because of fear of the consequences of harming them, their relationship with nature world has been peaceful, and the water sources, forests, and other natural resources are generally in good conditions. From the religious conviction, the nature is a dwelling place of the deities and anitos. The Igorots are also believed that nature or the earth has life. Every believing thing is believed to have soul, or a big ik for the Igorot language, without which it would not be a living thing. All parts of the natural world has spirits and souls. This means that Igorots believe that human and non-human creatures have been something in common, the soul or spirit. Now let me jump to the next slides, because I only have, I think, 5 minutes now, Doc. Sorry.
Yes.
It is also important to stress that aside from Igorot's belief in the spirit that dwells in nature, they also believe in the creator of everything that exists. That means on the top of their beliefs in numerous spirits that dwell in the world of nature, they also believe in another being who they called Butanala Ganbi Gatayo, or literally, it means our creator. Interestingly, the language itself indicates that the creator is singular and not a group of spirits, such as those that we are being placated to remove sickness. This means the spirit are just inhabitants and or dwellers in the nature, not its creator. Moving on, why the colonial options? Now, the question is, why the colonial option? Why this matter? Since the colonial project is ongoing, or coloniality, the term coloniality used by the decolonial scholars from Africa, from South America and Caribbean, it's still ongoing and affects communities, particularly the indigenous groups far and wide. Scholars have continuously started to explore radical avenues of challenging epistemic violence against indigenous knowledges and practices. For decolonial scholars and activists like Walter Mignolo, for instance, for them, we need to challenge this epistemic violence that silence and destroy the indigenous knowledges, skills, practices, and spiritualities. Following the decolonial thought, Dr. Lope and I argue that one has to delink and disobey the Western imperial knowledge production. One of the goals of the colonial option is epistemic disobedience. The epistemic disobedience is interested to dismantle whiteness in the knowledge production, or Western whiteness knowledge production. However, the colonial thinkers contend that decoloniality can only be realized when these Eurocentric and American epistemologies can be examined and challenged. One is epistemic disobedience calls into questions the basis of and the control of hegemonic knowledge, especially the white supremacy or Eurocentric American epistemologists, and offer a way to reaffirm the significance of situated knowledge or contextual knowledge. Hence, it rejects the hubris of zero-point epistemology. More importantly, Universals are being questioned, including privilege, knowledge, and culture that produced by the Western academic imperialism. Epistemic disobedience, second, epistemic disobedience rejects the notion that there is an orthodox Western canon of thinking that applies in various contexts and cultures. It condemns epistemic violence. What do we mean by epistemic violence? It is based on the colonial thinkers. It is silencing of the voices of the marginalized groups like indigenous knowledge and practice. Moving on, in the third point, epistemic disobedience hold that knowledge production requires pluralistic formations. Therefore, it rejects inferiorized non-Western other epistemologies, but engendered epistemological pluralism. Next, epistemic disobedience fosters holistic-oriented or intersectionality or theological reflection that is grounded in the people, particularly the vulnerable and marginalized groups, a place, a history, and a nature. Lastly, epistemic disobedience developed an epistemological framework to value indigenous systems of knowledge and spirituality. In conclusion, across globe, indigenous communities are fighting to regain access to their land, grappling with the consequences of borders drawn through the coloniality project of the West, or fighting to protect land that is constantly threatened by the forces looking to profit off the natural resources. However, to take challenge and to learn from the indigenous knowledge, skills, and practices and spiritualities, the colonial scholars and activists contend that one has to delink and disobey from the Western knowledge production. For instance, in the earth-based spirituality of the Igorots, there's no place for dichotomy between spiritual and material, which is prevalent in the Western form of Christianity or Western form of knowledge production. The spirituality of the Igorots shapes their attitude toward nature, and it's also bedrock of their socio-political and economic life. The social system of the Igorot is intertwined with this ritual ceremonial context as well as in its ecological setting. Hence, the identity of Igorots as a people is heavily shaped by their earth-based spirituality. Indeed, we Filipino Christians have so much to learn from the earth-based spirituality of the Igorot, especially in promoting human intimacy with nature. The Igorot earth-based spirituality also challenges the Christian theology to re-examine the notion of human being as separate and superior ordinate to nature, such as dualism, is one of the root causes of devastations of the Mother Earth, although it's not popularly now common to use that term in the West. Hence, to avert the total collapse of the world of nature, humanity in general and Christianity in particular have continuously, deliberately make a complete turnaround in their attitude toward nature. That is from the attitude of being the conqueror into the attitude of intimacy, care, respect of the nature, as demonstrated by the Igorot or the indigenous peoples or Filipinos. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Hadje. Sadje, this is very interesting. One of the example how indigenous people in Philippines and their spirituality, earth-based spirituality. Well, if you have any question, you can start in the chat while we are waiting for the second presenter. For the second presenter, Nuruddin Al-Akbar, are you here already?
Yeah. Sudah di sini.
Okay, if you are here, then you can start. You have 15 minutes to present your paper, and then we will go to the next presenter. Okay, time is yours now.
Okay. Apa sudah bisa terlihat ya gambarnya?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Here I want to present my paper about with the title of The Divine Love and the Universe, Mulyadi Kartanegara Indigenous Islamic Environmental Thought. I will start my presentation. There's some discussion point. First about who is Mulyadi Kartanegara, and the second is why is Mulyadi idea categorized as indigenous, and then Mulyadi versus Lynn White on Anthropocentrism and Science, and then we will discuss about Mulyadi indigenous Islamic environmental ideas that centered on the idea of spiritual or theistic evolution and conclusion. I will talk about toward spiritual Homo Deus. Yeah. Who is Mulyadi Kartanegara? Mulyadi Kartanegara is a Muslim philosopher from Indonesia who is known for his intense study of Islamic intellectual tradition in the medieval era, including philosophy, Sufism, and Islamic science. And Mulyadi is known as a philosopher who believed that the ideas developed by Muslim intellectuals in the Islamic medieval era are still relevant to be used to solve a contemporary problem. And one of Mulyadi belief is that the Islamic intellectual tradition in the medieval era, especially the work of, in this case, work of Jalaluddin Rumi and Ikhwan as-Sofwa or Brethren of Purity, contain a strong ecological spirit. So it is important to explore this treasure and contextualize them to solve the current environmental problem. And Mulyadi believed that environmental problem cannot be separated from problem at the level of consciousness. So a change in the level of consciousness become a necessity to overcome the environmental crisis. And the revitalization of Muslim intellectual ideas in the medieval era is an important strategy in an effort to transform current anti-ecological awareness into a pro-ecological awareness in the future. And yeah, Mulyadi wrote a special article in 1998, which became a cornerstone of his ecological idea. Yeah, the article was entitled "Environmental Ethic in Sufistic Perspective." Yeah, and this article is the result of the research he did at the McGill University, which at the time offered him to do a study about environmental ethic in Islam. And the article then reprinted as a part of the book chapter entitled Islamizing Reason, Response to Modernity, with the hope that the idea can be accessed by the public more broadly. And after writing the original article in 1998, it can be said that Mulyadi developed his ecological ideas in his various work. He has many books, but in more implicit language. It was only in 2021 with the launch of his latest book on Rumi, with the title of Rumi and the Modern World. And the idea about an ecological idea was put back more explicitly, and it can be said that both Mulyadi work with especially talk about the environment with a more implicit, and the other work which are more explicit are one integrated work. So the study used this work as a reference for understanding Mulyadi ecological ideas. And why is Mulyadi environmental idea can be categorized as indigenous? We can say that in a number of literature that talk about religion and environment or ecology, the categorization of world religion and indigenous religion is often used. World religion defined as a religion that has adherents in various parts of the world, while indigenous religion refers to religion that are more limited geographically. And the study attempt to define indigenous differently. Inspired by Hussein Nasr, The indigenous refers to the traditional worldview, which is characterized of both world religion and traditional, indigenous religion, such as Native American or many people using the word Indian religion. Where the feature of this traditional worldview is the strong connectivity between nature and human. And this traditional worldview is different from the modern worldview, which is based on the modern scientific reasoning, which makes a strict dichotomy between human and nature, and view nature as a raw material, without any spiritual significance. And this traditional religion can survive or experience erosion in every religion, whether it is world religion or traditional indigenous religion. For example, Nasser gives a case, the Western Christianity, that experienced a severe erosion, especially before the 1916. However, this condition cannot be interpreted statically, where the world religion or traditional indigenous religion can carry out a self-revitalization process. In this case of the Western Christian in the Europe, the idea of eco-theology has emerged, which seeks to reorient a more intimate relationship between nature and human. And it can be said that what Mulyadi offer is to seek this revitalization in the context of Islamic world. According to Mulyadi, many Muslims, whether conscious or not, have eroded their traditional worldview. So they follow modern logic, which tends to be anti-ecological. And this revitalization can be interpreted as indigenization process, because in an effort to change this worldview, a reconnection between Muslim and their forgotten intellectual tradition is needed. This explanation, the indigenous religion as a worldview that emphasize spiritual connectivity between nature and human, it can be put in world religion and traditional indigenous religion or native religion. It can be a continuity, jadi bisa terjadi kontinuitas atau juga terjadi break. Bagaimana juga di agama indigenous yang tradisional atau agama-agama native religion itu juga dimungkinkan untuk terjadi continuity, tapi juga mungkin juga terjadi break. Misalkan secara khusus, misalkan ini terjadi karena effect of colonialism atau modernism. Tapi in general, this tradition still persist in non-Western area. And Mulyadi kan project itu can be considered at this level. Now we move to another discussion about Mulyadi and Lynn White on anthropocentrism and science. Lynn White is important scholar on the field of religion and ecology, and Lynn White has a thesis on monotheism. He believed that monotheism, rational view of nature, gave birth to modern science, and Lynn White believed that modern science is the cause of today's environmental damage. In White term, when science metamorphosed into a techno-scientific culture. And Lynn White also has a thesis on the concept of human. According to Lynn White, the concept of human in monotheism, which tend to be exalted, jadi human itu diposisikan lebih tinggi from other creatures, it give way a birth of anthropocentrism. Jadi ini dianggap konsep monoteisme itu memberikan ruang bagi terciptanya anthropocentrisme, di mana The concept of anthropocentrism make human look down on nature as an object to be freely exploited. Jadi ya dianggap konsep monoteisme itu bermasalah karena dia memberi jalan bagi kelahiran sains dan kemudian dia juga mempunyai konsep manusia yang kemudian cenderung mengatasi makhluk-makhluk lainnya. Yang menarik, Mulyadi have a thesis on monotheism, different thesis. For Mulyadi, monotheism gives birth to a form of indigenous science that actually enables humans to reflect on themselves, including helping humans build more intimate relationship with other creatures. Jadi Mulyadi percaya bahwa nggak mesti seperti itu juga. Kalau kita melihat pada experience ya of Ikhwan of Sofa atau Brethren of Purity di masa medieval, itu ternyata sains yang dihasilkan itu beda. Dan yang kedua, monotheism give birth to a human concept that is not characterized by subjugating nature, but realizing its obligation to spread divine blessing to universe. Jadi bagi Mulyadi memang dalam tradisi monoteisme khususnya yang di dalam karya-karya Muslim di era medieval itu manusia punya kedudukan yang tinggi, tapi di situ dia mempunyai fungsi bukan untuk menaklukkan alam, subjugating nature, tapi dia diberi kewajiban untuk menyebarkan divine blessing ya kepada universe, dan ini bisa dilihat juga dalam experience-nya Ikhwan As-Sofa dan Jalaluddin Rumi. Jadi dia di sini menjadi menarik ketika dia memunculkan konsep bisa dikatakan positif anthropocentrism dan positif science gitu kan. And we move to another topic about Mulyadi Indigenous Islamic Environmentalism Ideas, and dan ini terkait dengan ide utamanya. Ini bisa dikatakan ide utamanya ini sangat terikat dengan gagasan besar tentang spiritual or theistic evolution. Jadi bisa digambarkan semacam ini. Ini adalah sintesis Mulyadi dari ide Rumi dan juga Ikhwan As-Sofa. Different from Darwin theory of evolution, the idea of spiritual evolution placed love as the energy of the universe. So the universe has a capacity to love and be loved. Jadi alam semesta itu bisa mencintai dan dicintai. Karena alam semesta itu bisa mencintai dan dicintai, berarti dia hidup. Inilah yang kemudian di dalam Ikhwan As-Sofa mempunyai istilah yang sangat khas yang disebut sebagai universe as big man. Mengapa dia disebut sebagai manusia besar? Karena dia itu sebagaimana manusia. Universe has a soul. And sebagaimana manusia, alam semesta punya cinta dan bisa berkembang, bisa bergerak untuk merealisasikan cintanya itu. Dan cinta di sini yang dimaksud adalah evolution of universe toward God, toward perfection. Because according to Ikhwan As-Sofa, objek yang dicintai itu adalah Tuhan. Maka kemudian dia harus melakukan transformasi untuk supaya lebih dekat kepada Tuhan, ya, semacam itu. Nah, evolusi semesta ini, kalau Darwin hanya bicara evolusi biologi, ini evolusi di tingkatan semesta dan inorganik. Jadi cintanya semesta pada Tuhan itu mempunyai implikasi lahirnya manusia sebagai mikrokosmos. Jadi di sini Ikhwan As-Sofa juga punya gagasan tentang ini semacam fine tuning universe. Jadi universe menjadi lahan untuk memungkinkan manusia itu bisa lahir. Dan dalam konteks Ikhwan As-Sofa, manusia itu diposisikan sebagai mikrokosmos. Kenapa mikrokosmos? Karena manusia itu memiliki semua elemen dari semesta, dan ada satu yang lebih, yaitu kemampuannya untuk mentransendensi diri. Sehingga dalam konteks Ikhwan As-Sofa sebenarnya manusia inilah yang diharapkan akan menjadi penentu proses evolusi menuju pada Tuhan. Dialah yang akan menjembatani alam dan Tuhan. Dia menjadi apa yang disebut sebagai manusia memiliki potensialitas yang kemudian diistilahkan menjadi pontifical creature. Pontifical itu artinya jembatan, gerbang untuk menghubungkan antara yang material dan yang alam Tuhan gitu kan. Atau juga diistilahkan oleh Rumi sebagai mouth of universe, dia adalah mulutnya semesta, di mana nanti berkah dari Tuhan itu akan turun lewat manusia dan kemudian disalurkan pada alam. Jadi manusia itu adalah puncak tertinggi dari proses penciptaan, tapi dia mempunyai fungsi yang mempunyai tugas yang sangat tinggi juga, karena pada dialah evolusi ini harus terus berlanjut. Maka kemudian disebut man as makrokosmos, itu di istilahnya Rumi, di mana manusia ini mesti harus melakukan transformasi diri, evolusi itu dimulai dengan proses awareness, self awareness ya, untuk mengaktualisasikan dirinya. Dan dalam konteks ini Mulyadi mengatakan bahwa Islamic Science, khususnya dalam Ikhwan As-Sofa ini memiliki peran penting karena untuk menyadarkan manusia bahwa ternyata dia itu memiliki hutang kepada alam. Hutang karena dia diberi berkah, hutang karena dia bisa menghirup udara, hutang banyak sekali hutangnya. Sehingga dia itu sebenarnya adalah Islamic Science itu difungsikan sebagai tool to trigger self awareness. Jadi bukan tentang eksploitasi, tapi sebenarnya justru untuk merefleksikan diri. Dan kemudian evolusi ini dianggap berakhir ketika munculnya insan kamil atau perfect man atau pontifical man, atau kalau kita ini nanti di kesimpulan kita menggunakan istilah Harari, kita bisa menggunakan spiritual homo deus. Nah, kita masuk kesimpulan, conclusion toward spiritual homo deus. Nah, Mulyadi idea can be positioned as indigenous because his idea is he emphasized on the revitalizing the Islamic intellectual tradition in the medieval era with ecological spirit, a strong ecological spirit. And Mulyadi ideas are centered on the idea of theistic evolutionary idea, which is centered on the idea of universal love for God, so that universe move to get closer to its creator. And in this evolutionary process, a human who are part of nature are required to carry out an advance evolutionary process to become insan kamil, where the function of insan kamil, or we can say a perfect man, is to become a pontifical man who connect a divine blessing to all corner to the universe. The man become a mouth of universe. If it associate with a Harari idea of the continued evolution of human, jadi Harari itu percaya manusia itu belum selesai evolusinya, masih harus menempuh evolusi lagi to achieve perfection. Harari percaya manusia itu mencapai puncaknya itu pada homo deus ya. It can be said that perfection can only be achieved by a spiritual journey, or we can say spiritual homo deus, not by relying on technological development, or we can say materialistic homo deus, which is become the cornerstone of the Harari idea. Maybe that's what can I present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nuruddin, for the interesting presentation about the Professor Mulyadi's idea about Islamic ethic and Islamic environmental idea. Okay, we can now move to the last presenter, Nareswati Kintoko Budiningsi. Are you here? And the team?
Yes.
Okay.
I will be the one to present our paper.
Okay, great. So you have 15 minutes to present your paper, and then we will have a discussion about all papers. Okay, go ahead, your time.
Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Before I start to present the result of the study on the interpretation of the strata in a modern society, I would like to provide some limitation on the contextual and conceptual understanding that I use as a framework in this study. In accordance with the explanation given by Dr. Siva yesterday, the writing that we have written is a theoretical study of the tradition that are still widely practiced by the Indonesian people in general. But actually, in fact, these rituals are a tradition carried out by indigenous people long before the state of Indonesia was formed. The starting point of this research are based on the nyadran, nyekar, and give offerings, or we call it give something like sesaji, which we still often encounter as a form of religious tradition. The limitation in this study lies in the search for the basic value of these ritual practices. We try to provide some kind of like academic explanation of the ritual that are still carried out by the community, especially by us as a penghayat kepercayaan. Okay, the focus in this study will not touch on the field that discuss about what we gain from the ritual or how to do it. In other study, we are indeed trying to dissect the practice of meditation and sacred ritual scientifically, but however, in this study, we will not convey this material because it will be too broad. Back to main reason that underlying this research, we want to straighten out the negative stereotype that are often pinned on us as a penghayat kepercayaan when we perform prayer rituals such as nyadran, give offering, or nyekar. Yesterday, I remember Mas Samsul Ma'arif also expressed this concern. He tried to explore tradition outside the theological claims, if I'm not mistaken, and some explanation about ritual also we can see from Bibi's presentation yesterday. And it's related to our paper. So in accordance with that argument, the material that I will present focus on a theoretical study of the basic nature of ritual implementation by releasing its attachment to the religion. This awareness is, we used to see Srada as a cultural ritual and not a religion. It will provide an explanation of the dialectic of nyadran, give offering, and nyekar, which are we still practice it today. The misinterpretation in the meaning of that sacred ritual is based on an inappropriate perception that it can provide problem related to embedding negative stereotypes against certain group. I will start by explaining the different view on the implementation of ritual that are now we're still doing it. You can see that the negative stereotype that is often given to spiritual practitioners who still use flower, incense, that's become a slightly disturbing view of the sacredness of ritual actually. And not frequently, even then, the ritual that will be held have to deal with the community organization and be dissolved. The fear of performing ritual are seen as mystical has actually existed since the New Order era. Although, currently there is recognition from the government for address of local religions. This is a form of administrative recognition. I know that, but it will not necessarily be followed by a change in the negative stigma of the community. Thus, there is a need for an academic explanation of the ritual that are often performed by believers or penghayat kepercayaan, so that little by little, the negative stigma can be disappeared. The big question is, what is the Sadje or offering? And why some people like penghayat kepercayaan still have to pray under the tree, on the coastline, or bring food to the graveyard? Indonesia proverbs say that if you know tak kenal maka tak sayang, or more or less it's said that we must know something first to able to like it. So then I will try to explain the basic nature or ontology of nyadran or nyekar and offerings. So this study was carried out using a multi-scientific approach, like kakawin sekar bawana tanakung, which is the basis information for us, has been researched in the field of philology and the Javanese literature. While in the study, we will borrow a little theory from the legal field to see the basic nature of the nyadran ritual and the giving of offerings. The ontology of grave pilgrimage and offering as a part of New Strada, from the constructive interpretation concept by Ronald Dworkin and the mysticism theory of Bertrand Russell. The first is the theory from Ronald Dworkin, and borrowing concept from the legal studies. The rule must be interpreted clearly so that the subject of the rule can follow what is recommended and do not violate what has been prohibited. The sweep of the times bring changes to the habit that become the reason for an adjustment to the implementation of a customary law. This modification is intended to preserve the moral value brought by the rules of law by aligning practices that are adaptive to the development of social trends in the society. The rules that have been made have a standard of moral, which then become a reference in carrying out their function and role in accordance with the purpose of making these rules. Dworkin explained that there is an interaction between the goal and the object of interpretation. The ontology of grave pilgrimage give offerings that still exist contain value of strada. The core value of strada is carried out using a constructive interpretation models. Through the understanding conveyed about the previous rule of law, it can be analogized that strada is a customary law that is applied to those who are still alive. Closely related to the meaning of strada as a form of ritual that must be performed by those who are still alive for their deceased ancestor, according to Romo Manu explanation, who studied the practice of strada in Kakawin Banawa Sekar Tanakung, it was stated that strada has existed since the prehistoric times. With the value of respect for the ancestor he brought, strada becomes a form of cultural ritual which was later adopted by Dyah Adi Suprabawa at the end of the Majapahit era. And as a form of respect for the great king who had returned to the Somalaya, or if we know now is something like heaven, we know this practice was also carried out by King Jiwana of Kauripan also, and was followed by the other kings. Okay, the ontology of grave pilgrimage. This was one of the examples that still exists in Solo. It takes place in the Sriwedari using Pakubuwono X, I think. Pakubuwana Jateng. And we still perform it every Thursday and Tuesday. And this one, we know is offering that we give to Raja Mala that exists in Museum Radia Pustaka now. And through the purpose of working theory of constructive interpretation, the meaning of Shraddha is to be seen by considering similar ritual that were also performed by other king in order to obtain the complete picture. If a king held a ceremony honoring another king, it could be said that they paid homage to the predecessor. The essence of the value brought in Shraddha ceremony is not merely a ritual performed by the king for the king, but more than that, in the deep, it can be said that the Shraddha ceremony is carried out as a form of respect by someone who is still alive to ancestors who have died. In this picture, you can see this is from Romo Manu's paper. In many religions, the ceremonial or ritual system can be said to be fixed. However, the background, belief, intention, and doctrines changing. And we can say that from the picture, it can be seen that there is an acculturation of culture and religion that is developing in the archipelago. Changes in the doctrine and background of the implementation of ritual can occur along with the changes in the regime in power. However, the ritual continues to live from time to time. Until now, we are familiar with the Nyatran ritual, which is held during the month of Ruah, and Nyakar, which is performed to ancestor graves, and the giving of offering in the sacred places. In this context, it's that the value of respect from ancestor has a broad meaning. Ancestors are not only interpreted as someone who have related to us by blood, but someone who is respected like elder or determines the forerunner, or is also our ancestor. And according to the working, he has emphasized that the debate usually occurs as a form of a theoretical illusion that arises when there is no main character that can be limited, some kind of like limitation or barrier for the meaning that meets the standard for the general truth. There is a need of mysticism theory to be a standard for the constructive interpretation that can be used as a foundation to ensure that the Shraddha ceremony that changed its name and patterns continue to carry in the essence of the ritual. This is the mysticism theory from Bertrand Russell. The development of mysticism is adopted by the community will not be separated from the beliefs that apply within the social group and are given in the form of doctrines they well known. Mysticism adopted by the community has formed the basis of their view of life to live life. Human considered to have learned a more deeper condition and can see that have been seen as some kind of like hidden wisdom when you practice spirituality. According to that theory, we have 4 characteristics to determine the mysticism aspect in Shraddha. According to the first character of mysticism theory, people who still practice Shraddha in the form of Nyatran and Nyakar are those who have deep belief in something that cannot be explained by the senses. The spiritual experience felt by meditators, and in this context, is that of penghayat kepercayaan cannot be fully explained in a way that can be captured by the human senses. Moreover, when it comes to one's spirituality, there is knowledge gained through the personal experience, as Russell described it. And the second characteristic is unitary. This character view that good or bad are an illusion. This is also felt by spiritual practitioners as a result of their meditation and inner experiences. The access to the hidden wisdom that they get becomes a means of determining good actions according to the prevailing moral view. The Shraddha ritual as a form of respect for their ancestor, which they still carry out, is also the fruit of the hidden wisdom obtained by the ancestor in the past. By continuing to carry out the ritual, it can be said that there is an element of goodness that is carried out consistently. As Dr. Sivas also explained yesterday, there is a need to learn about the way of life and the indigenous people because they have a practice some kind of spiritual rituals that have values in harmony with the nature. Dr. Siva also explained that all the problem that faces today cannot be separated from the natural. So it is necessary to have an approach that is carried out by aligning oneself with nature. And the third character is illusion caused by the division of the time of form of awareness gained by the believers of penghayat kepercayaan through the practice of Shraddha as a ritual that has transcended and boundaries of space and time. The value in Shraddha are timeless and remain incarnated into other religious rituals which have now become a new reality in society, especially for penghayat kepercayaan. And the last but not least, the illusion that appear as a form of manifestation of evil does not apply to society, especially in the penghayat kepercayaan who believe that Shraddha is a good ritual. By doing meditation and samadhi, negative emotion that can lead to evil action can be controlled, and Shraddha as a form of respect from the ancestor by bringing object of beauty and divinity has taken care that the implementation of this ritual can be the fruit of high spirituality and open the field of the hidden wisdom. Thus, it can be seen that Shraddha is interpreted as a cultural form that is an inseparable part of mysticism. This is some kind of offering that still happening in Solo and Jogja, and you know how we still practices daily actually. And according to the KBS, the Kakawin Banowo Sekartanakung, and the swift of the Shraddha, now we can see that there is a form of offering that still have the same kind, but have some kind of like modification. We can see that the offering in form of food, drink, abilities, performance, and the replica of a ship formed from various type of flowers. It's because they want to show the pattern of an agrarian and maritime country in the Majapahit era. But now we can see that it's usually also we only use food, drinks, and the fresh flower because it can suit with our agrarian country. And the sweet is also introduced by the Wali Songo and Sultan Agung, contain moral value of Islamic monarchs. And now the ritual is done by the people who want to give a homage from the that ritual is going to what do you call we want to give it to our ancestor, but also our prophet. And it's contain religion value also. And the ancestors are not only determined by our blood relation, but also by social, religion, and cultural factor. And the place that we used to give an offering is now like graveyard, hermitage, like temple or tree or spring or river, and historical object. And the conclusion, the practice of Nyadran and Nyakar, which has begun to lose its meaning in society, turned out to have a noble philosophical value as a form of modification of Shraddha, as a ritual of respect for the spirit of the ancestor. Both Nyakar and Nyadran are forms of spiritual practice based on the belief held by the perpetrators. The process of constructive interpretation carried out on the form of the Shraddha ritual based on the characteristic of the theory of mysticism has given an illustration that the ritual originating from prehistoric time is still alive in the community. The time and changes religious values such as Nyadran and Nyakar. Understanding the spiritual of the of people into a society has a need to be preserved. This understanding will be a way to eliminate the negative stereotypes that are attached to the adherence of the belief as a people who still struggle a lot with a ritual that are considered as something supernatural and meaningless. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all three presenters. Now we have time for us to discuss the discussion sessions. So for your information, even for all the presenter, you can ask or comment on others papers too. So you don't need to wait from the audience, but also you can ask if you have any question or comment to other presenters. So we have one question here from Theo. So my question for all speakers, this is for all speakers. In one side, indigenous concept of life include their view about environmental or value judgment. In another side, science based on empirical judgment. If science become instrument serving for value judgment, then we can say, like Max Weber, that scientification of politics or concept of life is happening. If you disagree with this view, can we describe this as an epistemic disobedience? Then to what extent science can speak about indigenous concept of life with full of spiritual value? Thank you. Okay, you got the questions. Anybody who want to answer first? Because it's for all presenter, he said. Nuruddin, are you going to comment on that question?
Okay, I will comment on that. Thank you, Theo, for the question. The question is about the concept of science. Yeah, I think we can interpret science differently. Science can be considered as a modern science without supernatural explanation. But if we're using the Aristotle explanation about the four causes, the formal cause. I forget the four causes of Aristotle. We can using Aristotle four causes for the framework for science. So science can also touch the spiritual sides also. For example, science not only talking about the motion of the universe, for example, the motion of the planet, but also asking a question about why there's a motion. For example, if Ikhwan As-Sofa, if we using Ikhwan As-Sofa explanation, Ikhwan As-Sofa or Brethren of Purity argue that why the universe moving, for example, why the universe why there's evolution of the universe, because they want to make a perfection to get closer to God. So this is about the question about the teleological, that in the modern science the cause this cause is erased. Yeah? So we can asking this question again. But I think if we integrate the four cause, Aristotelian cause, we can make a dialogue. Yeah? Make a dialogue between the spirituality, religion, and science again. Yeah, because science is not contained in the framework of naturalism or materialism that consider the question of, for example, teleological is not a scientific question, but for Ikhwan Sofa, or you can by using Aristotle, this is a valid question. Yeah, not irrelevant question, but this is a valid question. I think so. Can we describe this as an epistemic disobedience? Yeah, if we using the concept of decolonial framework, we can say this is epistemic obedience for the Western definition of science, which is reductive. Yeah, but we can using another word, not a harsh word. For example, we can using this is integration. Yeah, integration of knowledge. Yeah, because if we return the question of teleology, for example, we can make the explanation of science more holistical, for example. And then to what extent science can speak about indigenous concept of life? Yeah, I think the answer is, for example, yeah, I using the example from Ikhwan As-Sofa. Ikhwan As-Sofa using using the example of the animal who live inside the earth, yeah, like worm, like and another animal who can live inside the earth, yeah, and the animal does not have eyes. Yeah, for Ikhwan As-Sofa, they asking why this animal do not have eyes, and then Ikhwan As-Sofa give an interesting explanation. They say that if the animal have eyes, so it is disaster for the animal, because if they live inside the earth, yeah, they can they can using the eyes correctly, ya. Jadi kalau gini, jadi kalau Ikhwan As-Sofa itu mengatakan begini, contohnya itu adalah hewan-hewan yang hidup di dalam tanah itu, seperti cacing atau semacam itu. Nah, itu kan tidak punya mata. Kalau sains itu hanya akan membatasi, sains modern ya, hanya akan membatasi pertanyaan itu pada ya sudah, cuma sampai situ ada hewan di dalam tanah itu tidak punya mata. Tapi kalau Ikhwan As-Sofa bisa dikatakan menggunakan argumen Aristotelian, akan mengatakan teleologisnya apa misalnya. Kenapa nggak punya mata? Nah, kemudian di situ Iwan Asofwa mengembangkan argumen bahwa kalau punya mata, ya malah itu bencana. Ya, hidupnya hanya di dalam tanah, sementara punya mata sehingga nanti kelilipan. Nah, bahasa Inggris kelilipan apa ya? Itu semacam itu lah. Sehingga di situ kemudian dia dari sains itu dia menarik kesimpulan lagi karena dia percaya bahwa tadi ada yang spiritualitas ya tadi. Penjelasannya yang bisa penjelasan spiritualitas berarti itu membuktikan bahwa ada desain yang desain yang tinggi di sana sehingga hewan-hewan itu tidak punya mata justru karena ada tujuan tertentu. Sebagaimana juga Ikhwan Asofwa kalau tidak salah mengatakan tumbuhan itu tidak punya indera perasa sakit ya. Does not have a pain sensor ya. The plant does not have a pain sensor because according to Ikhwan Asofwa, if a plant have a pain sensor, it is a disaster for the plant because the plant can moving. Jadi sebagaimana hewan, tumbuhan itu juga Ikhwan Asofwa mengamati bahwa tumbuhan itu kok tidak ada indera perasa sakit.
Your answer so we can have a time for the two speakers.
Ya, perasa sakit karena itu tadi ada alasan-alasan yang dibalik itu. Nah, itu di sains tidak dibicarakan lagi, tapi jika kita mengembalikan ke Aristotelian, kita bisa mempertanyakan lagi. Jadi seperti itu mungkin. Terima kasih.
Okay, so basically you agree that science can speak about indigenous people, indigenous concept of life.
Yeah, it can help.
Okay.
It can help.
Okay, then we can go to the next. Hadje, you wanna respond to that question?
Yeah. I think where's Theo? I think. Okay. I think first, Theo, thank you for your thoughtful questions. However, I think the question should be unpacked. The questions already has prototype. You know, what is science and not science? So I think that's for me, from the colonial perspective, that is problematic. Okay. And then second, I'm not sure what you mean by empirical. Okay, because it's also problematic now. Also coming from the colonial perspective. Okay, because it seems that it implies that indigenous knowledge, skills, and wisdoms and practices are not empirical. Okay, then I'm not into this. Well, I study Weber, but you need to be careful of the geopolitics, the geo-knowledge, how Weber produces sociological knowledge. So perhaps I would prefer the sociology of Alatas to explore the Southeast Asian issues and challenges. But however, I think Weberian sociological approach, it's useful, but I propose as Filipino decolonial scholars, I rather preferred the non-Western sociological thinkers like Alatas, and also this famous Indian scholar, Patal, is also a very interesting non-Western sociologist. So that's my very quick answer. And then epistemic disobedience and the linking. If you're serious of epistemic disobedience and the linking, perhaps we can start with Western theories, but we never concluded or ended with the same theories. That's why I'm arguing to let's challenge this hegemonic, the Western sociological or philosophical canon. Now, especially in the Philippines, I think we are now struggling that because until now, our curriculum, either that is in humanities or in social sciences, it's dominated by Western thinkers. And I find that very problematic. The fact that these approaches are not really coming from our context. And the fact that these Western thinkers fosters, even hide, the Western supremacy and racism. We need to for me, we need to address and be aware of that. And these categories, I think, science versus or science vis-a-vis with indigenous knowledge, I think it's not helpful for Filipinos, because when you say science, it already implied that the privilege of the Western science compared to non-Western knowledge. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's a very thoughtful response to that question. And then Nareswati, if you want to say something about, or you want to respond to these questions.
Okay, according to that question, now we are trying to make some kind of like continuous research so that we can provide an academic explanation of what we are doing and what the benefits are for humans and nature. As is the case most often encountered is research on offerings or sesaji in the form of chicken eggs, if you know, under the tree, or about the effects of meditation practiced by monks, which is now being practiced by many Europeans. We are doing the same about, we are doing like some kind of like research, the meditation practiced by the Javanese in the Taoist view that is often put forward by Mantacha. However, it is still a working in progress, given that we need to conduct a literature and practice a study to create a study that meet academic writing standard. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So, okay, we have Hadje, you have a question. Do we have Indonesian sociologists that foster Indonesian lived experience? Anybody want to respond to this question about
just
Indonesian
quick
sociology?
addition. Just a quick reaction. Thank you, Nuruddin. I really appreciate your presentation, especially when you use this Indonesian philosopher. I really like it, and thank you for sharing this knowledge. It's very helpful. Also very promising.
Anybody want to respond? Even the audience, you can, if you know somebody's from Indonesia, so you can respond this question too. Do we have Indonesian sociologists that foster Indonesian lived experience?
Perhaps the question is very vague. I mean, Indonesian scholars or Indonesian sociologists that articulated Indonesian lived experience using Indonesian categories. I'm just curious, because we're talking about we're talking about indigenous religions.
We do have some.
We have Mbak Jim. We have Najiyah Martiam also.
You're kidding. I don't know, Nuruddin, maybe you know somebody who you can categorize of, well, we have so many sociologists. and also scientists that also working on post-colonial theory and also try to explain about this. But I don't know now. I don't have it in mind, so I cannot mention any. But then one, yeah, let's see. But yeah, thank you for this question. It make us think now.
Can I ask
Yes,
question also?
Abdi.
Oh yeah, I want to answer the Sadje first. Actually, we have tried to make as you mentioned about try to thinking about the colonial paradigm, and we also work in CRCS also works with those kind of issue, and we also have some solar works on that. We have like Samsul Ma'arif with this the paradigm of indigenous religion, and also Najiyah Martiam also works in that issue by using the indigenous religions paradigm rather than world religion paradigm in order to delink and decolonize the issue. And in the sociologist era, we have Ariel Herianto who works in the Southeast Asia region, and you will have more insight from the Ariel Herianto from the perspective of Indonesian sociological. And the from previous era, we have like Arif Budiman with the sociological Indonesia, but more lefty, but still in Indonesia, something like that. And we can have, and you could go to Wednesday Forum in CRCS every Wednesday. We have so much talk about how to produce more indigenous paradigm and indigenous construction about this knowledge and try to delinking and colonize this. Thank you, Hadje. And also I want to respond to I forget the name. The one who present about the pilgrimage, the Srada.
Yeah, because you have paper about that too, right?
Because thank you very much. As a fellow in pilgrimage studies, I'm very excited and grateful to have this presentation in Igorots panel. So thank you, Mbak. Matur nuwun aku padamu. One practice that is arguably universal in many religions or cultures in the world is the practice of honoring the dead by living. We may call it pilgrimage, ziarah, nyekar, sowan, nyadran, etc. It's a practice that from the prehistoric era has been used and perpetually practices by human. And so instead of saying that the grave pilgrimage nowadays in Indonesia is an evolution form from the Strata in Majapahit era or pre-Majapahit era, I would like to argue that the ritual is a discursive practice among many traditions and culture that intertwine along the socio-political history. Those socio-political circumstances also play a vital role within the existence and dynamics of this practice. Because the indigenous religions practice, the indigenous religion is not come from the void. It's not come from a vacuum space. Dia tidak hadir dari ruang hampa. There is a socio-political circumstances. Those, on the other hand, by using mysticism as you do, the concept which born from the world religion paradigm. So the idea of mysticism actually born from the paradigm of world religion. Itu lahir dari paradigma agama dunia. As an approach to this practice, so one way or another, by using mysticism, it purposely put the indigenous practice as backwardness, syncretic maybe, and etc. That's why that's the negative statement, negative stereotype came, syncretic, something like that. So I agree with Mas Hadje and also Mignolo mentioned previously, we need to decolonize or delinking this paradigm. So in order to undermine this negative stereotype, I suggest to use the indigenous religion paradigm by describing the worldview of the indigenous religion itself, rather than borrowing the biased concept of world religions. So in terms of Srada, actually we could relate it by the way we honor the dead, as we honor as a relative in the way of living, and we have so much studies about that, and it's interesting if we could collaborate in more of those issues. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I agree. We need to collaborate and to organize, And sorry, just want to say this. Next year we are organizing a decolonial series. I will invite you all in the Philippines and establishing a decolonial center in the Philippines. Perhaps we can, collaborate, research, and including our institution to invite you as speakers. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's a good connection then from this panel, so you can collaborate in the future to build collaboration in the future and about decoloniality, right? So, okay, is there any other questions?
Can I respond to Brother Hadje for the question
Oh, okay,
about
yes,
sociology?
sure.
Maybe I want to apa ya, give a bigger picture ya. I think Indonesian sociology in general is also very Western ya, until now ya. I think the idea of, for example, the critical theory, post-colonial theory is still still developed in the many university. Although I can say that in the 17th and 18th era, there's a growing debate among Indonesian intellectuals about the possibility of the indigenization of knowledge. At the time, for example, for example, in economy, emerged a thinker like Mubiarto who proposed the idea of economy Pancasila. Pancasila is Indonesian ideology. It's different from capitalism and from socialism, the idea of Mubiarto. And regarding sociology, I think maybe Kuntawijoyo is one of the sociology who proposed indigenization project at the time. Kuntawijoyo is not a sociologist. It's not a
historian.
He is a historian, but he talked a lot about sociological theory and a problem. For example, one of his earliest work, if I'm not mistaken, the title is Culture and Society. He criticizing the modernization in Indonesia, that happened in Indonesia. He says that the modernization and authoritarianism at the time, New Order authoritarianism, bring new disaster to the Indonesian society. So he proposed the project of at the time he called it prophetic social science. He is very Islam. He has many is a strong spirit, Islamic spirit. So I think Kuntawijoyo, although he is not a sociologist, but he can be considered as one of the pioneer of the indigenization or decolonization scholar at the time. Maybe that's my response. Thank you.
Yeah, well, now you make me remember about other names, like even from, perhaps in responding to the dominant of Western science, or there's a Kuntawijoyo, and also from Win, who, now I forget, who promotes interconnection, integration of knowledge.
Amin Abdullah.
Amin Abdullah. So it's also part of the decolonialization of knowledge. So he proposed how to integrate all science, but he does not oppose modern science, I think. So Hadje, what is your view about Bandung Conference? Anybody want to respond to Hadje's questions? Anybody still remember what is Bandung Conference and what it's about? No. Hadje, what do you know? Mignolo mentioned about that, right? It's part of the decoloniality idea.
Yes,
it's
yes.
Bandung Conference.
You know,
so
Doc
can you
Naya, this is
explain
very
that?
interesting.
Yep.
When I read Walter Mignolo, he said that it already forgotten by the following generations or decades of scholars, that the important role of Bandung Conference. And I asked some of my colleagues from Indonesia, they never really not to appreciate, but really don't have knowledge about the important role of the Bandung Conference. When the Bandung Conference, several prime ministers called for non-alignment, during the Cold War. They are rejecting, the ideology from the West. Even Marxism, capitalism, they reject that, and they want to be non-aligned. with these Western ideologies. Because now here in Europe, I'm based now in Belgium, scholars now even questions, the knowledge production produced by the Marxist analysis. They said it's very Eurocentric. So the Bandung Conference for Walter Mignolo, it's very important because it's a first generations that try to engage, the global order, and to propose an options and getting away from these, two contending dominant ideologies, the global capitalism and Marxism. Because in the previous generations of Marxism, they ignored the role of women. They ignored the role of indigenous knowledge. They never, but perhaps failed to articulate the importance role of women and indigenous knowledge. Now, that's why I'm asking the question. This is the background why I'm asking the questions. What happened to Bandung Conference in relation to the Indonesians' attempt to decolonize or to respond to the ongoing impact of colonial and the destructive impact of coloniality in Indonesia, not only perhaps in Indonesia but also in Southeast Asia like Philippines, Thailand, in Malaysia, something like that. So that's why I'm asked these questions. If you have some discourse or conversations about the Bandung Conference, and I really appreciate and very impressive this conference, this organization, because I find it very interesting and very promising. I hope we can collaborate more.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we usually know in Indonesia the Bandung Conference as a KHA, Conference of Asian Africa Conference, rather than Bandung Conference. And I agree with you that the 10 principles of Bandung Conference never mention about the ecology as well as the indigenous term in that 10 principles, if I'm not mistaken, 10 Bandung principles. And we also in 2015 we also have held 60 years after the Bandung Conference, and we call it as the Bandung Spirits. So we try to retrace what the KAA or the Bandung Conference said, and we try to put this kind of Bandung spirits into this nowadays, and we have that conference. But yeah, and I think you get the right thing that during that conference also the issue of the indigenous people, the issue of the delinking or decolonized is also missing in there. The issue of how the women from I'm not saying that the third world. I don't like that word. From the south, something like that, from the south. So is rarely mentioned also, even in after 60 years after the KA conference, something like that. So yeah, I agree with you that we need to. It's a milestone for us. Like when we, as a third country or third world country or non-Western country, between the two blocks, have a decision to have. We have a third way. I mean, we choose the third way to decolonize. And Mignolo said that the third way is to decolonize. I mean, something like that. Yeah. Thank you for reminding us about that moment.
Okay, that's good, Abdi. So yeah, we have still have 4 minutes, 5 minutes. If anybody want to
can
add
I
something?
respond to Bandung Conference? Yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. I think Bandung Conference at least has produced a new discipline in the law, namely TWAIL, TWILE, third world approach to international law at Harvard University, and the proponent of TWILE says that the Bandung Conference is a milestone for the formation of TWILE. I think we can Google it for TWIL. Officially, is formed in Harvard, but they believe that Bandung Conference as an inspiration, a great influence for them. That's first. And the second, I think that Sukarno, the first president of Indonesia, maybe can be categorized as a decolonial thinker also, because in the 1913, Sukarno has proposed a cooperation between Marxism, nationalism, nationalist, and Islamist. And at that time, Marxism, because of the Soviet Union, and Islamism, because of the influence of Jamaluddin al-Afghani, was very international movement. While nationalists were precious of international movement at the time. And for Sukarno, the three power must be connected to fight colonialism. I think maybe the Bandung Conference was also inspired by Sukarno thinking to connect all the component or the power or movement in third world to create a better world. I think maybe that can that's the important contribution to Sukarno to the Bandung Conference. Thank you.
Any other comment or about that? So this is interesting. Thank you, Hadje, for reminding us about the importance of the Bandung Conference, because most of Indonesian don't, not many who remember about that. And then when we talk about decoloniality, and when Mignolo brings that, and then you go, oh yeah, we have that event that's very important in bringing this into discussion. So, and Abdi also, thank you for adding more information, and also for the three presenters, thank you so much. I think we have a fruitful conversation in this panel, so I hope we can still work together in the future. So thank you so much. And we still have other panels. So at 3 EM. So if you're interested, you can join that too. Okay, thank you. See you in other occasions.
Thank you, Nuruddin. Thank you, Kintoko and Doc Najiyah.
Thank you for the
Thank you,
opportunities.
Abdi. I will email you both. Thank you. Thank you.
Terima kasih Mbak Jim.
Terima kasih.
Sama-sama.
Terima kasih semua.